Welcome to another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. I'm GigaOM COO Howard Holton, and I'm here today with Rodrigo Brito from Nokia. The reason I wanted Nokia on is I think everyone knows Nokia, right? We all started with a tank. We started with a Nokia phone that was the smallest thing made that you could run over with a car that somehow had 6 months of battery life and just worked all the time. I think Nokia is one of those organizations that's just near and dear to a technologist's heart, right? It's like that favorite uncle when you were a child, right? But the technology version. I ran into Nokia several years ago when I first started kind of getting into the analyst space at a security conference. And what impressed me was Nokia has a like a solid platform of security tools, but you guys only focus on telecom, right? You don't sell outside of telecom, which I find to be really interesting and really fascinating and really smart in a day and age where everybody wants to sell to everyone, right? They want the biggest TAM possible. But let's be honest, the TAM of telco is what? It's got to be $500 billion or some crazy thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it seems like a big enough TAM. So Rodrigo, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll hop into the chat.
Hey Howard, thank you. So I'm Rodrigo. I'm based in Lisbon, and I'm leading the overall cybersecurity products business of Nokia. And as you mentioned, we have been focusing on our telco market and building our security solutions focused on telco. And the reason is that we identified a gap on the market. So a few years ago, when we decided to build this business, we were looking into the overall security solutions out there, and they are focused mainly on the IT network. So they will, because they, exactly as you mentioned, they want to go after every vertical or after all the addressable market. The same solution will have to work for a bank or for a retail store or for a telco. But when we go to the telco network, the world is quite different. So in IT, as you know, we are basically trying to protect laptops, mobile phones, IT servers. On a telco network, we are trying to protect network elements, which are mission critical, which have, are on a core or on the radio side or on a transport, which use specific protocols for which there are specific regulations. And we don't think that an IT solution that is a generic IT solution will cover all the needs, all the scalability needs, all the even attack scenarios that can happen to a telco network. And that's why we have focused on that. We saw that gap on the market, and we have been investing on being, let's say, the security supplier for the owners of a telco network, independently if they are a communication service provider or a owner of a private wireless network.
So let's be specific here, right? The thing Nokia focuses on is protecting the network, so the most valuable piece of our IT estate for companies that run the most valuable networks in the world, right? And not just valuable in their revenue, it's fine, but valuable in that the only way business works today is if those networks are up and running and secure. We need them to be secure. Right?
Exactly.
This is not, security is not optional for telcos. Not that it's optional for anybody, but
yeah, exactly. And when these networks go down, and sometimes unfortunately it happens, including due to attacks, people sometimes they will think, okay, it will be inconvenient because I'll run out of internet on my phone. I won't be able to use WhatsApp. But it goes well beyond this, right? People will not be able to use the ATM machines. They will not be able to pay on the supermarket. They won't be able to call hospitals. They won't be able to reach out to their family.
right.
So
you can't put gas in your
basically,
car. You can't ride public transportation. You can't put airplanes in the air. You can't, right? Like all of the things that allow modern business to move, right? Everything
it's a
we do in
mission
life.
critical network.
Correct.
Exactly. It's the country stops. And we have seen this unfortunately in a few cases. So the security analysts that take care of the telco part of the network have some responsibilities on top of protecting the data which is, of course, their responsibility. But on top of that, they need to prevent that the network goes down. And that's why they need to be experts on telco on top of being experts on security, which is an interesting combination and for which we think that specific technology is required. Therefore, our focus.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of scale of telcos, right? Because the thing that we're protecting is the network more than anything else, and the network generates a tremendous amount of data. Right, one of the major network providers for core networks is adding DPUs to their core switches specifically because of this challenge.
Yeah.
Right. So when we're looking at telco networks, can you give me any idea for scale
Yeah, I
for
can.
the data that's created?
I can. So let's look into the amount of into the size of a network. I would say that for scale, from a security standpoint, more than the volume of data, let's just look into the size of the network. I can tell you that there are operators in the world that will have tens of thousands of network elements. They will have 10,000 engineers accessing the network every day. So that's the scale that we can expect from a tier one on a large country. They will have tens of thousands just on 5G, right? If we go to all the technologies, we could go, to the, let's say, higher part of tens of thousands, if not to the crossing the hundreds of thousands of network elements across the network, and then several thousand engineers maintaining this network every day and therefore accessing the network elements. And these engineers need to access it on a secure way. So there are multiple technologies to ensure that they are doing it on a secure way. They are complying with the regulations. So they need to be monitored when they are accessing the network. For example, these network elements also need to be audited to comply with regulations and to ensure that nothing that should be closed is open.
Sure. And they
And
have to do all
then
of this without adding latency. They have to, right? They have
exactly,
to do all of
exactly,
this without adding felt overhead, because as we all know, you have 100 milliseconds to provide a response where a customer starts to think a site is degraded or down.
exactly.
Right. So while you're talking about all of these elements and all of these people, the only like thing that's roaming my head right now is, oh my God, I've done 1,000 NetFlow captures on a network, and that was painful. I couldn't imagine running 10,000 elements, right? I couldn't imagine running these big networks where I'm going to start to want to grab data sets that have been painful in other organizations. So what kind of challenge does that create for Nokia building these kind of security solutions, or for anybody, right? What kind of challenge
Yeah.
does this provide?
So the situation that the security analysts are facing at the moment is, first of all, the attacks are not a single incident. Many of the attacks that happen to this telco part of the network are multi-staged attacks, so at different points in time, and multilateral, so compromising multiple parts of the network and sometimes of humans. So for example, an attacker might start with the humans. They might start, for example, with someone that works at an operator and they want to compromise this person's account. Then they will find a way to get their credentials, and they might use, traditional techniques like phishing and others to or a malware to compromise this person's workstation. And then, for example, they might even bypass the multi-factor authentication using other techniques. So there are multiple other techniques to bypass the multi-factor authentication. Then they will, they might plant different workloads that they might, let's say, use later on different network elements. They will run a network, they will make network discovery. They might want to wait until the backup cycles are over so that when they detonate the attack, if the operator wants to revert to the previous backup is already compromised with those uh, vulnerabilities or exploits because the backup cycle is over.
Sure.
So the situation is complex. Then what we do is we collect data from multiple data sources. So to detect multi-stage and multilateral attacks, we need to be able to look into telemetry from the network functions to engineer activity data into data from the Kubernetes itself. We need to understand the topology. So if you want to understand a multilateral attack, you need to have the visibility on the topology. You cannot just have a list of incidents. You need to know which kind of attacks are happening to the telco network. It's not just about malware infections or stealing data from databases. When we look into a telco network, they might be trying to eavesdrop data on the network. They might be trying to take the network down, for example, via signaling storms. They might want to be deploying exploits so that later on they can leverage those exploits to take the network down, steal information, and so on. So we need to understand, we need to have a global view on the topology of the network, a knowledge of which attack scenarios can happen and are relevant on a telco network. And of course, we need to collect the data that allows us to identify these kind of attack scenarios. So that's what makes it different from a normal situation.
For sure. For sure. And again, right, you have to do it while somehow keeping the network load low enough that
Yes,
we're not impacting latency, that we're not impacting traffic, that we're not slowing down the ability of the customer, right, external to the telco, to get to the destination that they're looking for, right?
absolutely.
Um, all right, so let's talk about the elephant that obviously enters the room, and that is, what is the impact of AI? And we'll start with AI, and then what's the impact of Gen AI within the space? So let's just start with kind of a more general kind of conversation around AI and kind of the impact of AI to these telco networks from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Okay. So on descriptive AI, this is something that we have been using for a while in terms of detecting anomalies. So when I was mentioning, for example, these type of attacks that can happen to the telco part of the network, some of them can be framed into rules. And I love rules. It means, okay, we know exactly that A, B, and C mean that someone is trying to run a man-in-the-middle attack. But there are several scenarios that are not easy to put in rules. So basically, for example, user behavior. It's not easy to frame that into rules. And for that, we have been using descriptive AI for a while, where we basically search for the outliers. Instead of framing it into rules, we learn what is normal over time. And then when we have an outlier, then that's considered an anomaly, and we need to go and investigate what's going on. That's something we have been using for a while. More recently, we have been using Gen AI basically with a different purpose. It's not, let's say, at the moment for use cases. So it's not for detecting uh, uh, threats which are not known yet. We are at the moment focused on using it to speed up incident resolution. So basically, we have picked a very popular LLM called ChatGPT-4, and and we have augmented it with the knowledge that it is relevant to operate in this kind of environment. So, for example, we used a RAG model to augment it with static and with dynamic data. So, static data is, for example, telco standards, security regulations, uh, our own attack scenarios, our own threat intelligence. So what I was mentioning to you that we create in our labs to detect those attacks, we augmented the knowledge of the large language model of ChatGPT-4 in this case to understand that additional information. And then we have a dynamic training, and the dynamic training is that or allows to understand which scenario we are operating on. So, for example, we augmented the data with or the knowledge of the LLM with the topology, with the incidents that are open, with the engineer activity, and in the end, this allows a security analyst to have a chat with the LLM about that specific incident because the LLM knows that incident and knows the environment where the solution is operating. And in the end, this allows basically to speed up things. And that's what we do now. But we do anticipate that in the future, we will be able to use this technology to look into the data and find new threats, so hunting scenarios and others. So I think we are just in the infancy of the Gen AI technology.
Yeah, I tend to agree, right? One of the things that I think about when we go through these conversations, right? I get a lot of questions about why would I want to use AI for this, and my response tends to be it's a question of dimensionality, right? Like when we're looking at UEBA, right? When we're looking at user behavior analytics, um, the challenge that we have is it becomes really easy to create a rule that says if this person works outside of this country, block them,
Yeah,
right? That becomes a very questionable rule for efficacy, right? I don't want a bunch of false negatives. I don't want to prevent people from being able to do their job. So now I got to go, okay, well, this country and this country and this country. People go on vacation. And I don't know about you, but I have yet to have a vacation where I can fully disconnect.
yeah,
Right? I have yet to have a vacation where where there's not one message I have to deal with, where I don't get one text message or one Slack that's of a high enough priority that somebody pulls me away from my vacation. And as of yet, there's no good way to communicate my vacation plans to everybody.
exactly.
Right? Okay,
Exactly.
fine, Howard, fine. When they're not using their device, okay, cool. Well, I don't know about you, but I've had a device break on a weekend, then I got to go replace it.
Yep.
So how do you fingerprint the new device? You know what I mean? So we start to
That's
get into this
difficult to
level
make
of
rules
right.
for that.
Right. So when we get into dimensionality and especially dynamic dimensionality, right? When the study of psychology shows that humans can only track about a half a dozen dimensions before they start to lose track, before our brain is overwhelmed. And a dimension could be a username, a device, an IP address. You know what I mean? A dimension.
Yeah,
The advantage to machines and especially artificial intelligence is the ability to link together tens, hundreds, or thousands of dimensions to create like a fingerprint, and those dimensions don't all have to be equal,
absolutely.
right? They can have
And
variable values. So if the machine is the same, if the user pattern is the same, but the IP address has changed, or the country has changed, or the wireless network has changed, right? All of those factors can change in a very dynamic way, and they could change based not just on that the country changed, but it changed from what to what over what period of time, right? Um, and so
absolutely.
when we start to look at AI, we are absolutely at the infancy, but both kind of traditional AI, which I know the word traditional makes it seem like it's not at the infancy, but it's absolutely still at the infancy. And then generative AI, this explosive new topic that we talk about, we're absolutely at the beginning of generative AI.
Yeah,
Right?
I fully agree. I fully agree. And on Gen AI, if we pick an example on how it can dramatically help a security analyst, let's imagine in the network I was describing to you. So tens of thousands of network elements, thousands of security engineers accessing it every day. You find a threat on a specific network element. So you'll find a malware infection, you find an open backdoor. You might be able to fix this easily, right? If
Sure.
you have a port that is not supposed to be open, you can close it. But how long will it take you to find who has opened it? Who has deployed that malware on this network element that, by the way, infected 20 other network elements? How do you go and how do you find the root cause? Uh, and this is something where Gen AI can help a lot because Gen AI has a huge computing power behind. It can just go and and analyze all the access logs of all the topology and might be able to point you, 5 months and 3 days ago, this specific engineer accessed this network element completely outside the usual behavior. And that was at the same time as we had the first malware infection of this specific malware. And here you go, you just saved a few days of work. Um, that's how I see it. I cannot imagine a security operations center in a few years from now that will not use um, Gen AI in
Yeah,
some
yeah, for
form,
sure.
as I cannot imagine myself in a few years from now not using Gen AI
For sure.
because I already use it and I'm used to
Right.
it. So
Right. Yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? I think historically IT was a series of characteristics. That's kind of what we did, right? Oh, there's an incident. That's a characteristic. Okay, cool. Let's go look at that specific incident for that specific thing. The problem is cybersecurity has become a series of stories, not a series of characteristics, not a series of incidents. And while an analyst might be okay at putting together the incident, we actually need to look at the entire story, right? When did the infection start? What was infected? What was compromised, which may not be an infection, right? How do I put all of that together? Because that's really the cybersecurity incident, and make sure that I'm able to undo the damage from all of those steps.
I
We see a
fully agree.
lot of reinfection. We see a lot of recompromise, and that's because we don't actually know where this stuff started, right? We know
Exactly.
what it affected, and we know how to get that system back online and that system restored. But if they're still in the system, if they've still got things running, if they've still got backdoor access or side door access, right, the ability to come back in is not going to be solved. And so Gen AI has the potential to really help there. One of the other
Yeah.
use cases I really like for it is CVEs are complex. CVEs are
Yes.
written by aliens for other aliens, right? And
Yep.
so one of the great uses I have for Gen AI is give Gen AI the context of the CVE, ask it for the action items, and then have it put together 3 emails to inform your leader, to inform a business leader, and to inform a board level person, right?
Right.
Because that's really hard to do, and most technical analysts aren't familiar with how to do that. Gen AI
Yep.
has a deep, wide understanding of how language works, leverage how language works, right? So I think there's also a lot of use cases that'll start to automate that, right? In the future, I see Gen AI being inserted in between communications created by technical people and communications created by non-technical people, right? To
Absolutely.
really smooth that up. And the dynamic nature of that, right? Okay, cool. You add someone new to a ticket. This has now become a bigger issue. I'm no longer communicating with the person whose system was impacted. I'm now communicating with the business unit owner whose systems were impacted. Cool. Gen AI can regenerate all sorts of information for that person, for that persona, based on the things they care about and what they need to be concerned about, which is different than some new person. And it can automatically do that, right? We
Right.
could add another layer as that changes throughout the organization. We can start changing all of that, right? All the way up to the point where how do we inform externally? What's our policy for informing legal? All of those things, and make sure that the output matches the requirements,
Fully
and we can
agree.
get to the point where that's automated,
Fully agree. And
right?
you can see, like, for example, a security analyst after solving an incident, how long will they take to write a report to inform their management or to inform the regulator? Gen
Right,
AI can just speed this up very
right,
significantly. And as we were discussing, in these threats where we have, as part of the same attack, we have multiple infections we see, or systems compromised over several months. We see that just treating the symptom, as you were mentioning, without understanding the root cause, might be actually, just like taking a pill to fix the symptom,
sure.
but the problem is still there, and it will come and hit hard a few months later. And we know that all or most of the sophisticated attacks, this is how they work. It's not that they infect the system today and they will let you know today, right?
No. Most attacks, especially those that are damaging, have a very long dwell time,
Exactly.
right? And that's the goal. When I review investigation reports and the timelines, um, the the ransomware attack, the ransomware attack happens for 2 reasons. The first is they've pulled all the data out that they could find. They've spent a bunch of time in your network. They've messed about and they've exfiltrated all of the data they think is valuable that they can find use for. The second one is someone's getting close and they're worried about being detected and they hit they trigger the switch and blow it up, right? The
Yeah.
second that happens, you're not chasing them anymore. You're trying to solve this problem,
Yep.
right? Allowing them to get out, escape, and manage the next step for them, which is continuing to make your life miserable. Uh, but the second
Absolutely.
ransomware goes off, right? The second that bomb goes off, we're now in recovery mode. We're now in restoration mode.
Reactive.
We're very instantly reactive
Yeah.
and focused on the reaction. We're not so focused on the long-term investigation, and everything we do to restore has the potential to erase tracks, erase evidence that would be useful in backtracking that attacker, right? And so those are the things they plan on. So this is why and where Gen AI becomes even more valuable, right? Gen AI is about speed more than anything else. Certainly today, right? It still hallucinates a little too much. It's very much about speed. We don't want to remove the human from the loop. We still want to keep a human in there. And so even in my examples, I'd want the technician to review the things that were going to be sent out and at least give them, either respond back and say, hey, this is factually incorrect, you need to change it accordingly, or approve that these are factually correct, even if lacking in complete nuance, so they can be sent out. So all right, so I think this has been super interesting, but I do want to touch on one more thing, if that's okay, because I think
Absolutely.
there's another technology kind of right around the corner that has the potential to change cybersecurity, and I think you might have some thoughts on it. So talk to me a little bit about, while quantum isn't here, it's not in the hands and readily available like these other things we've talked about. It is kind of right around the corner and has the potential to be as disruptive as Gen AI is to what we do, and certainly within cybersecurity. So talk to me a little bit about, like, what's your 2-minute takeaway for executives listening to this? What's your 2-minute takeaway that people should really be aware of when it comes to quantum computing, kind of where we're at and its impact on cyber?
Okay, so the quantum computers, as we know, can break many of the existing encryption ciphers. So this means that everything that we think that it's encrypted might not be encrypted when the quantum computers have enough qubits to decrypt those existing ciphers. While this is not a super hot topic today because it seems to be a bit away, because probably the quantum computers will only have enough qubits to do this in a few years from now, maybe in a decade from now or 5 years, we don't know. But we do know that they will have, at some point in time, enough stable qubits to break existing encryption ciphers. And therefore, there is an attack already ongoing today, already happening since years, which is basically the steal now, decrypt later. So we assume that we have an encrypted line, and nobody is listening because it's encrypted, right? We are doing everything right. However, what if they are stealing that information, eavesdropping on that information, storing it, and they know that in a few years they will be able to decrypt it? For several scenarios, uh, this will bring lots of problems, right? Because even 5 years old data, if it's the right data, it can create a lot of trouble. So that's something where I think that the industry will go in the next few years. That will become a big problem. And I would say that there are things that we can do already. Like, for example, just the basics, knowing where you have your digital certificates, being able to replace them automatically. So improving this crypto agility, having this crypto inventory, it's just a start, a small step to a start towards, a quantum safe journey.
Yeah, that was going to be my kind of next question, right? Is what do we do? And it seems like taking a review of your encryption state, right? Taking a review of your cryptographic state is probably a smart first step.
Yes,
Unlike 10 years ago, today there are tools that will auto manage certificates for you,
absolutely.
right?
And
So absolutely get that in place and make your cert expiry as short as you reasonably can. Don't be insane, but don't produce these 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 year long certificates anymore.
yeah,
Right? Build certificates that have a relatively rapid replacement cycle. Believe it or not, all my personal certificates expire every 30 days because I've used free certificate services for a long time. And that's how long they give you on a free certificate, is 30 days. So I've had automated systems for my home lab for a long time. Surprisingly enough, the home lab world is very used to rapidly expiring certificates because we're all cheap and use free stuff. But I think we're getting to the point where enterprises need to kind of come along as well, right? So start thinking about that, right? Think of these guys as early Egyptologists before the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, right? We were gathering the information, we were gathering the hieroglyphics for a very long time, not knowing what they said. All of a sudden, the Rosetta Stone showed up, and we could read the hieroglyphics.
Great analogy.
Right? So I think that's fantastic. I think that's a good place for us to end, right? Pay attention to your cyber estate, pay attention to your cryptographic estate, and really review your policies and procedures to make sure that not only are you prepared and ready for what's here today, but that you're readying yourself for what's about to be here tomorrow. Rodrigo, this has been fantastic. What's the best place to reach you other than Mobile World Congress in Barcelona next year?
Reach out on LinkedIn.
Are you
Thank you, Howard.
Rodrigo Brito on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you for joining. This has been another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. I'm Howard Holton. Please like, subscribe, follow, share, comment, and if you'd like to be a guest or have a guest to recommend, please let us know. This has been great. Hopefully, we'll have you on again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rodrigo.
Thank you.